Am I the asshole for kicking my sister-in-law out after she threw away most of my single-use baby products and even formula? I, 19 female, have a 3-week-old baby girl. I do still live with my parents, but since I pay rent equally, they say I can have just as much of a say of who comes in and who comes from the house as they do. I've never actually taken advantage of this rule until recently though. I have a brother who's 26 and his wife is 24. They're crunchy parents to an 8-month-old. Basically what that is fucking stupid. They use reusable wipes, nappies, think formula is the epitome of evil, baby wearing, and the list goes on. I'm the complete opposite. Pacifiers, supplementing with formula due to low supply, disposable wipes, and nappies. They are completely against the products I use and often give me things like my sister-in-law's breast milk in bags, disposable nappies their loved one has grown out of, etc. I've used some, but it's not really my cup of tea. On Monday night, my brother and sister-in-law were minding my baby for me since it was my birthday, and my baby's father, not together, very close friends and co-parents, took me to get some dinner in one of my favorite fast food places. When I got home that evening, my sister-in-law said that she did some cleaning and threw out anything I don't need. This immediately gave me red flags, but they were in a hurry to get out the door and left almost immediately. When I went into the nursery, every disposable nappy and wipe pack was gone and replaced with some reusable cloth ones. Same with my formula. There was 8 tubs of it and all of it was gone. I'm not able to replace them at the moment and solely breastfeeding isn't sustainable for us. I was extremely angry and I just turned my phone off to avoid being mean to my sister-in-law. She and my brother came over yesterday to collect something they forgot, and that was when I confronted her. I told her she has to replace everything she dumped. When she said she can't afford to, I said fine, just get out and don't come back until I've been reimbursed or everything is replaced with the original items. My brother thinks I'm being a massive asshole and he's on his wife's side. Of fucking course. Our parents think I'm being completely reasonable here, but they think telling her essentially not to come back is taking it too far. So, am I the asshole?
Should I break up with my boyfriend for fat shaming me? My boyfriend and I started dating 2 years ago. At the beginning of our relationship, I was weighing 130 pounds. So back then, he never had a problem with my weight. In fact, he used to praise me and tell me that he loved my body. He always would tell me that my curves were sexy, and I would sometimes tell him that I wanted to lose weight, but he would always say no. In fact, a few months after we started dating, I went on a diet. I lost about 5 pounds in 2 weeks, and he told me that I needed to stop. He told me he liked my womanly body. So I stopped dieting. At first, I was happy that he loved my body so much, but at the same time, I didn't feel healthy, which is why I started the diet in the first place. After I stopped the diet, I still kept on eating healthy, with the exception that every now and then we would have pizza or fast food. But I still tried to keep it to a minimum. So my boyfriend is actually in the Marines, and he had to go away for a few months. This sent me into a depression because I missed him so much. And because of that, I started eating a lot. I would ask my mom to cook me my favorite meals, and I would basically just eat all day. At the time, I also didn't have a job, so that was making me depressed as well. So I ended up gaining 40 pounds. Part 2 is up. Should I break up with my boyfriend for fat shaming me? While he was in the Marines, I ended up gaining 40 pounds. I was super depressed and I didn't have a job and I missed him so much. One day he calls me and tells me that he's going to be home in 2 weeks. And that's when I knew I needed to start dieting again. But then part of me remembered that my boyfriend liked me when I was thicker and curvier. So what I did was I cut down on all the fried foods, but I still kept eating a lot during the day, which basically helped me maintain the weight instead of just losing weight. In preparation for his coming home, I went to get my hair done, my nails done. I even got a facial and I went to get wax down there, which of course is super painful. I even went to pick up some lingerie because nothing fit me at the time. I also cleaned my entire apartment and cooked him a really nice meal. To tell you, I even called his mother to ask her for the recipes. I was so excited to see him. He finally shows up to my house and I have everything ready. But as soon as he sees me, he asks me what happened. I said, "What do you mean?" Then all he said was, "You're fat." At first I laughed because I thought he was joking. Then he says, "What's so funny?" It's like he was instantly angry. I told him I gained some weight and that I didn't bother losing it because he liked me curvy. That's when he said, "Yeah, I like you curvy, not fat." Then he told me I looked disgusting. Part 2 is up. Should I break up with my boyfriend for fat shaming me? After he told me I looked disgusting, I instantly broke out into tears. That's when he said, "What did you expect?" Then he said, "I've been away for months. The last thing I want to come home to is a huge gut." But then I started crying more and he kind of softened up. He said that we could work out together and that he could help me lose the weight. He then pulls up his phone and shows me a picture of what he thinks I should look like. It was basically some random Instagram model that he followed, who was actually way skinnier than I was when he first met me. For the next week, he barely touched me, and he would make little snide remarks every time he saw me eating. For example, one night we decided to watch a movie at my place. I asked him if he wanted any snacks, and he said no. Then I told him I was probably gonna make some popcorn and if he wanted any. That's when he said I needed to watch what I was eating, especially at night, and that the last thing I needed was snacks during a movie. This obviously hurt my feelings. And of course, I started dieting again, but this time I was even more strict about it. I basically cut out every single thing that I like to eat, and I was only eating lean meats and salad, but very little portions. One night he invited his friends to come over to watch a football game. Instead of me having to cook, I offered to order them pizza and they said yes. When the pizzas finally arrived, my boyfriend said in front of everybody, "You don't get to eat any pizza because you still need to lose weight." I was so horrified, mortified, I wanted to literally crawl under a rock and die. His friends started laughing because they actually thought it was a joke. Then he says, "No, you guys, I'm serious. She's so fat." I couldn't believe my boyfriend was putting me down like that in front of his friends. I gave him the silent treatment, but he really didn't care. After a full month, I started finally losing weight. It's been 3 months now, and I'm weighing 120 pounds. Now he's all over me and constantly tells me that I look beautiful. But I'm never gonna forget how he treated me when I was heavier. I know that I should break up with him because of how he treated me, but I really do love him. And he's back to normal now. He loves me and touches me all the time. What should I do?
Story time about how I did the dirty with a celebrity. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I've been modeling for the past 2 years, specifically on Instagram. I basically made it my job to DM as many celebrities as I possibly could. I knew that it would only be a matter of time before at least one said yes. And that's what happened many times. I would usually DM about 5 celebrities a day, men and women. The next day I checked my DMs and one of them had written back. This was a huge celebrity who I was not expecting to reply, but I was freaking out. We had a conversation all through DM and then he asked me for my phone number. So we moved over to texting and quickly he asked me if I wanted to get together. I was like, duh. So we decided to meet at a bar. But because of COVID, we decided we would both get tested and then meet up. Really responsible. We both tested negative and then I got ready and went to the bar. Of course, I was extremely nervous. I show up to the bar and he greets me right away and we just start having a conversation. He asked me if I wanted to be an actress and told me that he could help me out with that. But we all know that was just a lie. We go to his car and I'm making out with this big celebrity in his car. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Let me explain how we got in his car. We were at the bar flirting and then he brought up acting. He said that if I wanted to become an actress, he would be happy to help me. And he said that he actually was staying at a hotel room nearby. That he had a script he wanted me to read because he thought I'd be great for the leading lady. I was floored. I didn't think he was going to be moving that quick. I hesitated but eventually said yes. Once we're in the hotel room, he orders champagne and we start watching a movie. And he pulls out his laptop and tells me to read the script. As I'm reading the script, we start kissing and doing other things you guys already know. After we finished, I asked him if I could continue reading the script. Then he said, no, I'm good. My heart sank and I thought I was going to poo my pants. He said, what do you mean you're good? Then he said he couldn't cast someone who would just sleep with someone on the first date. Then he just sat on his laptop and ignored me. Of course, he says, hey, I want to order dinner for us. What do you want to eat? Then he said he wanted to wine and dine me. He said that he liked me, but the whole NDA thing really threw me off. We ended up watching a movie and then I go back to my place. The following day he calls me and asks me if I want to hang out again. We had lunch and then I told him I had to go home. He's been asking me out ever since, but I don't know. I kind of get a bad feeling from him. What do you guys think I should do? He is a celebrity.
Story time about how I found out that my mom was sleeping with my history teacher to get me better grades. So it was my junior year of high school, and everybody knows that your junior year is the most important year of high school. If you didn't, well, now you know. My brother was in his senior year of high school, and when he was a junior, he had the same teacher, so he knew how hard the class was. So he would stay up with me every night helping me to pass my history class. Well, the one day I'm at school and I'm taking a test, and I literally did not know anything on the test. And I studied the night before for literally 4 hours straight. So I decided to copy off the girl next to me. Well, a few days later, we get our test back. And I'm looking at mine, and I got a 97%. And then I look over to the girl next to me. She got a 33%. And then I started going through the tests. None of the essay questions looked like my handwriting. But I didn't say anything because I wanted that A. Well, the one night, I'm sitting down with my family having dinner, and I told them that I copied off the girl next to me, and how I got a 97% and she got a 33%, and my brother flips out like for part 2. Part 2 of my mom sleeping with my history teacher to get me better grades. So like I said, I told my parents that I got a 97, she got a 33, and I was telling them how the handwriting didn't even look like mine, and everything. And then my brother starts flipping out, in front of my dad too. He goes, Mom, are you fucking serious? You couldn't let her try and do this on her own? And I was super confused. Like, I thought that maybe he was talking about my mom paid off the teacher. But then he said, yeah, Dad, if you didn't know, Mom's been fucking our history teacher to get us better grades. And then he goes, Mom, you're such a fucking whore. And my mom's sitting there not even fazed. She just took a drink of her wine and said, get the fuck upstairs now. Before my brother leaves the table, he goes, maybe you can fuck Dad's boss too. Maybe he'll get a raise. And then I realized what was happening. And it's around 6:30 p.m. So after that, a lot of stuff happened. My dad obviously wanted to get a divorce at that point. So my dad took my brother and I to our grandparents, and we stayed with them for like 2 weeks. But then everybody at school found out, and we got made fun of a lot. And then after that, we moved schools.
Story time about how I stole my best friend's boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My best friend and I had known each other for almost 7 years. We met in college and she was always dating around and had several boyfriends. I had no boyfriends because my parents were super strict even though I was in college. There was only one boy that I really liked, but like I said, my parents were super strict so I could never date anyone. What's worse is that I know this boy had a crush on me too. Fast forward 5 years later, my best friend and I are living together. She's on Tinder, Bumble, and all these other dating apps. She had been going on several dates because she really wanted to find a relationship. Well, one day she comes home and she says that she really liked this guy she went on a date with. They ended up dating a month before I even met him. One day she invites him over because she wanted me to meet him. He comes in and as soon as we lock eyes, I'm in shock. It's the boy that I had a crush on in college. Which, like I said, I knew he had a crush on me too. We hugged and chatted for the entire night, and I could tell my best friend really liked him. A few days later, he starts following me on Instagram and we start DMing. He tells me that he had a crush on me in college and I tell him that I did too. Part 2 is up. My best friend's boyfriend starts DMing me on Instagram. He confesses that he had a crush on me when we were in college together, and I told him that I did too. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. From that day on, he would DM me every single day and we would just flirt back and forth. I started feeling really guilty and I told him one day I can't do this anymore. That's when he told me he also felt guilty and that the best thing was for us to stop talking, so we did. I was so sad. A few weeks passed by and my best friend asked me if she could have the apartment all to herself because she's planning a romantic dinner for him. I said yes, but I felt so jealous. I left the apartment because I realized that I was so in love with him. I went to the supermarket and ate a whole pack of Oreo cookies and went to the movies. I get a text message from my best friend asking me to come home immediately. My stomach sank and I thought she had found out. When I get there, she's crying and she says that he broke up with her. I asked if he said why, and she said because he was in love with another woman. My stomach sank again. I was there with her the entire night while she cried, knowing her boyfriend left her because of me. Part 3 is up. My best friend's boyfriend had broken up with her because of me. I didn't have the heart to tell her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. A few days later, she started going out on Tinder dates again. I could see that she was feeling better, so I decided to confess to her everything. And she told me she could tell that he and I liked each other. Then she told me I should date him. Well, I didn't waste any time. I sent him a text message and asked him if he wanted to meet up for dinner. And when we did, he asked me to be his girlfriend. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. He even got my name tattooed on his neck. The only problem is that my mom thinks he might do the same thing to me. I don't even want to think about that because I truly believe that he loves me. But let's hope not. I've been planning the wedding and I asked my best friend to come. Of course she said yes. She's super happy for me. And she actually has a boyfriend now. Do you guys think my fiance will end up doing the same thing to me? Story time about how I caught my husband cheating on me with a neighbor. My husband is a really rich guy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I first met my husband when I was 20 years old and he was 10 years older than me. He was basically my sugar daddy. Once I graduated college, he asked me to work at his company. I did all of the marketing. But eventually we wanted to have kids, so we decided to move to a bigger house. We ended up moving to a really secluded neighborhood with lots of rich families. One of our neighbors owned a yoga studio. There was also a young couple living across the street from us and they were also business owners. It was the perfect situation until I noticed that my husband was paying less and less attention to me. Well, I didn't hesitate to ask him why. He denied it and said that I was making things up in my head. So I installed an app in his phone that would send all of his text messages and emails straight to my phone. And guess what I saw? Text messages between him and the neighbor who owned the yoga studio. She was 10 years older than my husband, so I never saw it coming. I started collecting all the evidence into folders, pictures, and text messages. I wanted to catch him in the act. So one day I said I was going to a spa for the entire day. Part 2 is catch my husband doing dirty things in the pool with our neighbor. I'm recording all of this, by the way. He says he was going to tell me. So I show him all the evidence that I had been gathering, all the messages and the pictures. But little did he know I had already hired a lawyer. I'd known about the affair for about a month at this point. I had already been working on the divorce with the lawyer, documenting every single transgression my husband committed against me with our neighbor. And when I told my husband, he freaked. The neighbor, aka the woman my husband was with, she got out of the pool and went home. I printed out some flyers with all the pictures she had sent my husband and spread them around her yoga studio. I now get $10,000 from my husband month. I told my husband I was going to be at the spa all day long. I wanted to see if he was going to bring the neighbor around to cheat on me some more. When I got in the car to leave, I get a message that he sent to the neighbor. Like I said, I had planted an app in his phone, so I was receiving all the messages he was sending and receiving. And of course, he sends her a message saying, hey, my wife's going to be at the spa all day. We're free. And she replies saying, perfect, I'll come over. My stomach dropped. I drove around for a bit and waited for her to get to my house. Then I see she sends him a message saying she's there. That was my cue to go back to my house to catch him in the act. I race back and enter the house super quietly. I go into the living room and don't see anything, so I assumed they were in our bedroom. I go up to the bedroom and no one's there. And I see they're in the backyard in the pool. I pull out my phone and press record. I run downstairs and I surprise them in the act. They were both naked and my husband jumps out of the pool and wraps himself in a towel. Our neighbor stays in the pool. My husband says, I was gonna tell you, I swear. It gets worse. Part 3 is up.
Story time about how a stranger wandered into my house and it led to something amazing. I woke up one night to someone ringing my doorbell over and over vigorously. I looked at the clock and I saw it was 3 in the morning. I went to the door and looked out of the peephole and saw a young woman outside on my porch. I opened the door and could immediately tell that she was intoxicated. She started explaining to me that she was at a bar down the street and lost her phone. That's when she asked if she could use mine and call someone for a ride home. It was freezing outside, so I reluctantly let her in. She asked me for water, so I led her to the kitchen. She proceeded to open my fridge and start eating my lunch meat and various other snacks. She then kicked off her heels and sat down at the table with a jar of pickles and started talking to me like she's known me for years. She told me her name was Krista and asked me how work was and what I was up to tomorrow. I reminded her that she needs to call someone to come pick her up and handed her my cell phone. She took the phone and FaceTimed her brother. She told him that she needs a ride but she has no idea where she's at and handed me the phone to talk to him. I told him the situation and gave him my address to come pick her up ASAP. A few seconds later, my doorbell began ringing again and someone started banging on my door. I went to the door and opened it to find a guy outside and he looked furious. This is when things got intense. Part 2 of how a stranger wandered into my house and it led to something amazing. I opened the door and quickly found out that this guy was Chris's boyfriend, and it became clear that they were in some sort of fight. Chris started telling him to leave and accused him of following her and kept screaming at him that it's over between them. The guy turned his attention to me and asked what guy Krista was here to sleep with and began accusing her of coming here to cheat. He started yelling at me for helping her. All of a sudden, he grabbed Krista by her hair and started dragging her out of the house. I quickly ran after them and started screaming at the top of my lungs for him to let her go. Luckily, one of my neighbors heard the commotion and came to our aid. The guy let Krista go, but now he was trying to fist fight my neighbor. A few seconds later, a truck pulled up to my house and a man jumped out, which turned out to be Krista's brother. I quickly explained the situation and helped Krista into his truck. Krista's brother proceeded to confront her boyfriend, who was still making a scene, knocked him out clean with one hit, and drove off, leaving her boyfriend knocked out cold on my front lawn. Her brother texted me the next day thanking me and apologizing for knocking that guy out of my yard. We started texting back and forth and getting along, and I actually asked him out a couple days later. We've been dating for a few months now thanks to his drunk sister stumbling onto my porch. I guess everything happens for a reason.
Storytime about how my boyfriend has a secret child with another woman. We've been together for 5 years, and I never knew that he had a child. His son is now 7 years old. A little backstory. When my boyfriend and I started dating, everything was great. He was the perfect boyfriend. He would drop anything to help me. He paid for everything, was super considerate, fun, and loving. But everything started to change last year when we moved in together. He told me that his job was starting to give him night shifts. Essentially, we never saw each other during the day or spent any time together. He also started telling me that he was too tired to go out on dates. I'm a paralegal and my office is really close to our apartment. So during my lunch break, I would go home to eat. One time that I came home, I caught him talking on the phone in the bathroom. I could only hear that he was whispering and it sent chills up my spine. When he came out of the bathroom, he was shocked to see me. I asked him who he was talking to and he acted dumb. He said he was just ordering a pizza. He was actually supposed to be sleeping because he worked the night shift. I knew something was wrong. I decided to follow him that night to work, and guess what? He didn't go to work. He went to another woman's house. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my boyfriend has a secret child with another woman. I followed him that night to what I thought was his job, but instead he drove 10 minutes away from our apartment to another woman's house. I parked a few cars away so I could see what he was doing. That's when a little boy and a woman come running out of the house. The woman kisses him on the mouth, and he carries the little boy and hugs him. Believe it or not, I instantly got sick. I got out through the passenger door and vomited. I was horrified. My first thought was that he was married and I was the other woman. They walked into the house and I stayed waiting for him the entire night. He left that house at 6 in the morning the next day. But before he could get into his car, I confronted him. He was obviously shocked to see me there. He confessed that was his son, that he wasn't married to the woman. They were only together. So I was right. I was the other woman. He explained that he wasn't in love with the other woman and that he didn't have the heart to tell her he was in love with someone else. He got on his knees and apologized. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my boyfriend has a secret child with another woman. He got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness, but I had already made my mind up. I told him he needed to move out by the end of the day. I got in my car and slept for about 18 hours. When I woke up, all of his stuff was still there. He was in the kitchen making me breakfast. I gave him a chance and I let him talk. He explained that he and the girl had a very toxic relationship and that I was the first woman he'd ever met that he truly loved. But I just couldn't get over the fact that he was lying to me every single day for 5 years. Instead of going to work, he was going to her house. I told him that I saw him kissing her and he said that that's just how they greet each other. He swears that they don't have anything going on between them. It's been about a week and he's still living with me. I basically gave him a second chance, but my instinct is telling me something's wrong. I met his son a few nights ago and we got along really well. He's a really cute boy and he loves his dad a lot, and I could see how much my boyfriend loves him too. I don't want to break my own heart, but I feel like I can't trust him anymore. He swears he'll never lie to me again. I have this constant stomachache now, but I still love him. Should I stay with him or not?
Storytime about the time that I had a thing with my stepbrother. So a little background information. I was 14 and it was the first half of my freshman year. So my dad had recently broken up with my mom and he had different girls in and out of the house 24/7. I mean, he was kind of doing his thing after a 15-year marriage. Well, the one day I'm sitting in the house and he brings this girl Kayla over. She had a few kids herself, but both of them said that they would never date. Well, I thought her son Tyler was extremely good looking. So him and I started talking over Snapchat, and things were going good for quite a while. Well, I would say a few months later, my dad told us that Kayla was coming over with her kids. And I was super confused because he seemed really nervous about it. So her kids and I were all sitting on the sofa, and they sat us down and they were like, "We need to talk to you guys. We're gonna call my dad Mike." She goes, "Mike and I are dating now, so we all have to get along." The reason why she said that was because she thought that I didn't get along. Part 2 about how I had a thing with my stepbrother. So like I said, my dad and her sat us down and she goes, "Mike and I are dating now, da-da-da-da-da." And she was like, "So we all have to get along now." Because she thought that I didn't get along with some of her kids, and her kids did not respect my dad at all. So like I said, Tyler and I were dating at this point, and I freaked out. I was like, "You guys can't start dating because Tyler and I are dating." And Kayla was like, "Well, that's too bad. You two need to break up because I'm your new mother now." And I'm sitting there like, what the fuck did this bitch say? So I start screaming that it's not fair. Tyler's trying to calm me down. My dad is trying to calm Kayla down. To be honest, my dad didn't really care because I had told him about Tyler and I before the whole situation. I thought Tyler would be really upset at the situation, but he was actually pissed off at his mom. So we broke up. Kayla and my dad dated for a little bit over 2 months. Well, surprise, surprise, Kayla cheated on my dad with her ex. So Tyler and I started dating again. Story time about the girl who left me unconscious in the girls' bathroom. So a little background information. I was pretty young at the time. I was in 7th grade and I was 11 years old. And there was this girl who we're gonna call Jenna. Jenna hated me for absolutely no fucking reason. She would bully me because I had red hair, and she would text me literally every day at the same time, telling me to off myself and how I was weird and how nobody liked me. One day she randomly started being nice to me. She sat with me at lunch and her water bottle was empty, and she asked if I needed mine filled up too. Stupidly, I said yes. Well, she ended up putting drugs in my water bottle. After like 20 minutes, I started feeling sick, so I went to the bathroom, and I was kneeling over the toilet when everything went black. Well, when I didn't come back from the bathroom, my teacher got worried, so she sent security looking for me. They were banging on my stall. Obviously, I was fucking unconscious, so I didn't answer. So then they called the fire department, the police, the ambulance, were all there. Like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who left me unconscious in the girls' bathroom. So like I said, the fire department was there, the police, the ambulance. They called the fire department because they couldn't get the door off, and when they removed it, it fell on me. So I was injured and unconscious. And just a little background information on this girl, who, mind you, was literally 11 years old. She had a 3 criminal record and was recently in prison for 5 days, or juvie, whatever the heck you want to call it, because she brought a knife to school and tried to stab some kid who had called her fat the day before. Anyways, back to the story. I wake up 4 days later. My mom's sitting next to me. They put Abby in jail for 13 years for suspicion of attempted murder, and she was kicked out of school. And now I'm homeschooled and failing all my classes. I now have seizures because of the drugs that she gave me. So yeah.
Storytime about how my blind date hid in my closet for 8 hours. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I'm in my late 20s and I've been looking for a boyfriend for years now. I started using dating apps, but none of that worked. Recently, my boyfriend started dating this really cool guy. He told me he had a really good friend and that he thought they should set me up. Of course, I had never met this guy before. I didn't know if he had social media. I didn't know anything about him. My sister and her boyfriend set up the whole thing. Oh yeah, and my sister told me that he was a doctor, he owned a boat, and loved golfing. So I got ready for the date and I showed up to the restaurant. Right away, he comes over and says hi to me. He knew that I would be wearing a pink shirt. We sat down to eat and we basically stood at the restaurant for 3 hours just talking and having fun. We talked about a bunch of stuff, and towards the end of the date, he gave me a kiss and asked me out again. I said yes. We said goodbye and I went home. Then I decided to go get ice cream and I went back home. I watched some TV, went to sleep. The next morning, I'm getting ready. I open my closet door and he jumps out. Part 2 is up. This guy had been hiding in my closet for 8 hours watching me sleep and change. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Ran into my living room and I asked him what he was doing. He said that he really liked me and that he just wanted to spend some time with me and he didn't know how to tell me, so he decided to come over to my place when I went to the supermarket the night before. I asked him how he got in and he said he came in through a window. I looked at my window and it was wide open. Remember I said I went to the supermarket in part 1? That's when he decided to come into my apartment. By the way, at this point I had just finished showering and I was in my towel. My knees started shaking and I was so scared. I asked him why he hid in my closet for 8 hours. He said it wasn't a big deal and that he thought I wouldn't see him. Then he actually said that he was excited for our second date. He started walking toward me and I told him to stay away. But then he started getting really angry. So I decided to play it off and act like everything was cool just so that I could get out of my apartment safely. I stayed with him in my apartment for 2 hours. Then I pretended I wanted to go get breakfast together. But then he lunged at me and tried to kiss me. Part 3 is he lunges at me and tries to kiss me. I pushed him away, but then he tried again. I ran to the door, unlocked it, and ran to my neighbor's house. I could feel him right behind me the whole time. He was asking me to calm down while I was running away. Did he actually think I was going to be flattered that he was hiding in my closet for 8 hours while I slept? Luckily, my neighbor opened the door right away. He let me in, but my blind date tried to pretend that we were together and that we had just gotten into a fight. My neighbor knew better because he knew my situation. He locked the door and then we called the cops. It turns out he went to the same gym I did. My sister's boyfriend goes to the same gym. So he asked my sister's boyfriend to set us up, even though they actually didn't know each other. The cops looked for him but couldn't find him. I haven't seen him since.
This is why best friends can be abusive too. I had moved to England with my ex around 3 to 4 years ago. We had broken up and remained good friends and just rented a house together. We weren't hostile and learned that we were better as friends than in a relationship. I started going out to local bars and shops to make friends because I didn't know anyone there. This is when I met a guy named Craig who quickly became my best friend. He was a little odd, had family in the area and his own flat. Shortly after meeting Craig, my ex moved back in with his family and I couldn't afford to make rent on my own. This is when Craig and I decided to rent a house together. We weren't romantically or sexually involved, we were strictly just friends. He was the type of guy who always had a few girls in tow, so he'd never be without a love interest. I started seeing a guy named Jay who would stay over a few times throughout the week, eventually becoming my boyfriend. Craig quickly made it known that he hated it. We would argue about him and I made it known to him that we were only friends, so he needed to stay out of my dating life. One night, Craig pounced on me in my room, getting on top. He put his knees on my arms and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" And I honestly thought I was about to die. As I felt his grip tighten, I thought of my mom who was only 4 to 5 hours away. I thought of how she'd never know what happened to me or how she'd have to identify the body of her only child. Part 2, why best friends can be abusive too. By some miracle, I kicked Craig off of me and ran for my life. He had double locked the front door, hid in my bag, and smashed my iPhone. I was running down the stairs with him yelling right behind me that he was going to kill me. I knew the back door was open from him having a smoke earlier. I ran for it and made it to the street. I was barefoot, in shorts, and a pajama top. I ran for what felt like ever towards the town. 30 minutes later, I used a payphone and called the police. They picked me up and I told them the story. They took me to the station and took photos of my neck that had bruising along with my head that was bleeding from when he smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I sat in the patrol car as they went inside of my house to pick him up. They found him in the streets looking for me. They arrested him and put him in a cell overnight while dropping me off to gather my things. I was terrified he'd be released and come back at any moment, so I grabbed just a few of my things in a rush. I didn't have my phone or any money. I drove to a patrol station bleeding from my head with no shoes and bruised up. I broke down using their phone to call my mom. She was annoyed that I had woken her up at first, but once I explained what happened, she sent me $200 to fill up my tank and get something to drink to calm down. Then I drove to my parents' house. Craig got out in the morning and it was his word against mine. I blocked him on everything and changed my number, cutting off all contact. I sometimes still get flashbacks of that night.
Storytime about how I broke the news to my very religious family that I was single and pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me an Instagram. My parents are very religious and super strict. I was never allowed to have boyfriends or even talk to boys or even have guy friends. My girlfriends only could come over to my house and I could never go over to friends' houses. I was never even allowed to go to parties. Anytime I needed to make a phone call, my parents would monitor the phone call, so there was absolutely no way I could get away with anything. And I never even lied to them. I got straight A's and graduated valedictorian from my high school. When I turned 18, I went to the university my parents wanted me to go to. My parents are very rich and have lots of money, so I knew that they would get me into whatever university they wanted me to go to. When I finally got accepted into university, I begged them to let me stay on campus, even though we're only a 2-hour drive away from the university. I wanted to have privacy, and of course, I wanted to feel like a grown-up. After months and months of convincing my parents, they finally said yes. They even got me a private dorm so that I wouldn't have to share my room with anyone. For the first time in my life, I had independence and I could make my own decisions. But still, all in all, I was a pretty good girl. I would go to class, go study at the library, and then go back to my dorm. I never went to any parties, but I did start making friends. One of these friends was a really wild girl. She was in my dorm building and she pretty much did everything I ever wanted to do. She was wild and crazy and I just wanted to be like her. She started inviting me to all these house parties and I didn't know how to say no. I went to one of them and I met this really cool guy. At least I thought he was cool at the time. We spoke all night and he tried to make me believe that he was this perfect little boy. And of course, I fell for it. After hanging out a few more times, we did the dirty. And then he ghosted me. This was the first time I had done anything like that and I was really heartbroken. I was convinced that this guy was gonna marry me. That's how naive I was. After the last time I'd seen him, I realized that I hadn't gotten my period. And when I checked my calendar, it had been 2 months since I got my last period. Now you may ask why I didn't notice this before. Pretty much because I was studying all the time. I never really gave myself any breaks and I was constantly reading books and doing homework. I basically lived in my books. When the realization of not having my period for 2 months came in, I was devastated and I knew that I was pregnant. I ran to the nearest drugstore and got a test. When I saw that it was positive, the first thing I did was call the boy. But like I said, he had ghosted me. But this time he did answer the phone because it had been a few months. I told him that the test was positive. He told me the baby wasn't his and then he hung up. Unfortunately for me, I had no idea where he lived. I decided to Google his name and apparently he didn't even go to the university that I was going to. He was just a friend of some guy that went there. Finally, Christmas break arrives. I was 4 weeks pregnant and I showed up to my parents' house. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I broke the news to my very religious parents that I was single and pregnant. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, send me an Instagram. I was 4 weeks pregnant, the guy that got me pregnant had ghosted me, and I knew I had to go home for Christmas from university. I had thought of how I was going to tell my parents and I even wrote them a letter. I was simply going to hand my parents the letter as soon as I got home. But when I got there, they were so happy to see me. I hadn't been home for a few months and I could tell that they really missed me and I just didn't want to spoil the moment. So instead of telling them the first day, I waited until the second day. I came out from my bedroom and my mom asked me why I looked so pale. This is when I just said it. I'm pregnant. My mom instantly began to cry and asked me what happened. I could hear my dad coming down from the stairs. I turned around and said to him, I'm pregnant. When my dad saw my mom crying, he sat down on the couch and said nothing. And this was scarier than him yelling at me. My mom joined him on the couch and then I sat on the floor right next to them. That's when I just decided to tell them the truth. From beginning to end, I told them exactly what happened. Then my dad said, don't worry, we will help you. I could not believe it. And as soon as my dad said that, my mom stopped crying and said, yeah, he's right. We're your family and you don't need that guy. The only thing my dad asked from me was to stay in university. And I told him that there was no way I was going to let my education go to waste. I could tell my parents were really disappointed in me, but they didn't say anything. We had all our family coming over for Christmas dinner, and my dad announced it to everyone then. Instead of acting the way I thought he was going to act, he was almost happy. He wasn't angry, but he was disappointed, but he didn't hide it like a little dirty secret. My family congratulated me, and they were all very happy. But of course, they started asking all these questions. When I told them that the father wouldn't be involved, they were really upset. Luckily, my aunt was dating a private investigator at the time. I gave her the baby daddy's number and name, and she gave it to her boyfriend. He came back with a bunch of information for me. Apparently, he was a dropout and didn't have a job, but he came from a very wealthy family. So my parents and I decided to get a lawyer and ask for child support. When I had the baby, my family was so happy. He is literally the light of our lives. He is so loved by his grandparents, and I'm so grateful to my parents. We all live together, and my baby is 5 years old now. His grandpa and him are best friends, and they do everything together. Now, the baby daddy wants to be in my child's life, but I don't know if I should say yes or no. Up until last year, he didn't want anything to do with us. But now that he sees that the baby is older and he plays, he wants to be involved now. I don't know if I should say yes, but I also feel bad depriving my child of his father. Merry Christmas, and what should I do?
Every time I take a drink, I'm reaching out for you. Seems I'm always late night texting, reaching out for you. Every morning I find drunken messages spilling the truth on you.
Storytime about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends. Yes, I was that person. Anyway, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat. And after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. And we met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice. It was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house. We watched a movie and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed with no clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, if you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you. Life for part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to, once again, kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months.
Am I the asshole for making my boyfriend eat meat at my family gathering even though he's vegetarian? My boyfriend, 24, and I, 28, have been together for 2 years. Yesterday, we were visiting my family because we won't be able to be with them on Christmas, so we wanted to drop off some presents. It was also the first time that my boyfriend met my entire family, so it was really important to me. Here's the thing, I forgot to tell them that my boyfriend is vegetarian, so my mom made a turkey and there wasn't anything else to eat besides some snacks. When I realized that, I quietly asked my boyfriend to please not cause a scene and just eat the food and compliment my mom on it. He tried to argue saying that he doesn't want to lie to my mom, but I told him he'd come across rude if he didn't try it. Am I the asshole for making my boyfriend eat meat at the family gathering even though he's vegetarian? He said he doesn't want to lie to my mom, but I told him he'd come across as rude if he didn't at least try it, and I didn't want him to make a bad impression. So he sucked it up and ate an entire plate and told my mom it was delicious, which obviously made her happy. We had a good evening and everyone seemed to like him, but when we drove back home, he brought it up again and said he thinks it was messed up of me. I literally made him eat meat knowing how much it disgusts him. I do get this point and I did apologize to him, but I still think it's not that bad to eat a bit of turkey. Especially because it was just one and it was done because I didn't want him to make a weird impression on my family. Am I the asshole for making him eat meat?
Storytime about why my mom kicked me out when I was 16. So a little background information. This had all started as soon as my dad left my mom and I. I was like 13 around the time. Well, ever since then, my mom would have different guys in and out of the house all the time. Like, we were lucky if a month went by and she was still with the same dude. Which, I mean, I kind of get it because my dad did leave us for a woman that he had started another family with. But at the same time, it was just a whole mess. Anyway, so she had got with this new guy, and we're gonna call him Tyler. And by the way, the dudes that she would date, they would literally live at our house. Anyway, so a week after he moved in, I started getting really close to him, which usually never happens. Usually I would try to keep my distance because I knew how wrong it was of her having all these different guys in the house when I'm only 16. Anyways, every time that my mom would go to work, he would invite me to go see a movie, and he would just be really flirty with me. And he was only 6 years older than me, and my mom was 32. You do the math anyways, like...
This is why you should always sit in the back seat. Vivian was spending a year in Korea when something terrifying happened. One night she was going out with her two roommates who spoke Korean, and at the end of the night they decided to get a taxi home. Vivian sat in the front and her two roommates sat in the back. This would be her first mistake. The driver spoke really good English and began telling jokes. Vivian found them really funny but soon realized that her roommates weren't laughing. In fact, they had a strange expression on their faces. Vivian said what's wrong, but they wouldn't answer. Suddenly one of her roommates said something to the driver in Korean and he pulled over on the side of the road. Vivian knew something was wrong. They weren't anywhere near their apartment, but her roommates got out of the taxi and started walking away quickly. Vivian paid the driver, then got out to follow them. And that's when she found out the truth. Her roommate said, "Did you hear it? It was coming from the trunk of the taxi. A woman's voice saying, 'Help me.'"
My mother-in-law tampered with my birth control, resulting in me getting pregnant 3 months postpartum. My husband, 22 male, and I, 20 female, welcomed our daughter into the world 18 weeks ago. She's a darling baby and really pretty easy as far as newborns go, except for one. She wasn't a son. My in-laws were obsessed with the idea of us having a son, to the point that they denied she was a girl up until the moment she was born. Why? Because the bloodline follows the father. If you don't have a son, our family name will die out. The day they came to visit in the hospital, my in-laws asked when we would be trying for another baby. We kind of just laughed it off, but my mother-in-law got more insistent, straight up telling us, "Y'all need to try for a boy." Over the next month or two, the conversation about us having another baby sort of tapers off into little comments every now and again. Around this time, mother-in-law started coming over daily. Fast forward to present day, 2 days ago now. My husband poured me a mixed drink, and when I brought the cup up to my lips, I got hit with this paranoid and panicked feeling. I immediately put the cup down and insisted we take a pregnancy test. Sure enough, it comes back positive.
What?
For several reasons, we hadn't been able to get hormonal birth control, so we'd been using condoms. We decided we wouldn't tell anyone because we didn't want another baby stampede from his family. But I'm incredibly close to my sister-in-law, so I decided to tell her after swearing her to secrecy. When I told her, her eyes got wide and started to water. Sister-in-law bursts into tears and starts apologizing over and over. She calms down a bit and through her tears tells me that my mother-in-law has been poking holes in our condom.
What a psycho.
on how I told my mom her boyfriend was sexually assaulting me and she didn't believe me. Okay, so boom, let's jump right into it. So I was 14 at the time and my mom had a long-time boyfriend. My mom and this guy been together for about 3 years. Unfortunately, my dad is in jail, so I only talk to him over the phone when he calls. I always got creepy vibes from my mom boyfriend and I told her about this. I told her how he would put his hands a little bit too close to my booty, and when he would hug me, I can like feel his down there area. And when he would kiss me on the cheeks, every now and then he would always do a mistake and kiss me on my lips. She didn't believe me because she never seen anything. Well, one day he took it extremely too far. My mom was at work and I was alone with her boyfriend. I always stay in my room away from him because again, he's creepy, but this night it didn't stop him from coming into my room and violating me. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I told my mom her boyfriend was sexually assaulting me and she didn't believe me. Okay, so boom, like I said, her boyfriend came into my room and violated me. I tried to run away, but he pinned me on the bed and he started kissing me on my neck. Then he snatched my shirt off and my breast was exposed. At that moment, my phone started ringing. The ring distracted my mom's boyfriend, and at that moment, I took my phone and I ran out the house. Yes, I ran out the house with my breast exposed. By the grace of God, it was my dad calling from jail. I missed his call, so I had to wait till he called me back. So in the meantime, I called my mom. I told my mom everything and she told me shut up. She hung up the phone and did nothing. She even called me a liar. I ran to my best friend's house with my breast exposed and her parents took me in. Eventually, my dad called me back and he saved my life. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how I told my mom her boyfriend was sexually assaulting me and she didn't believe me. Okay, so boom, like I said, after my mom didn't believe me, I ran to my best friend's house with my breast exposed and her parents took me in. I waited for my dad to call me back from jail and he eventually did. I answered the phone and I cried telling him everything of what just happened. My dad from jail became my hero. He sent a lot of his friends to my mom's house to handle that guy. Of course, we pressed charges and he's going to be serving time in jail. All my dad's friends helped me pack and they all brought me to my dad's mom's house. My mom came home to an empty house and my dad's mother has been granted custody of me. My mom was horrible. I hated living with her. Her boyfriend was physically abusive while she was verbally abusive. She didn't believe me and that hurt, but my dad believed me and saved my life. Can't wait to see him in a year.
What is the deal with parents who are like, you should be thanking me. I feed you. I pay for your meals. Bow down to me. I think I'm gonna continue standing. You do you, though. Like, whose fault is it that I'm here? Y'all signed up for the proper parent program 15 years ago, and now you're getting cold feet? Like I did not request to take on life. Y'all are acting like fetus Molly was up in heaven with her fingers crossed, waiting to be conceived like, oh my God. Can y'all just do the deed already? The sooner the better. I want to be an April baby, not May. Also, parents, why are you suddenly complaining to your children about having to feed them? When we were in the womb, it was not a problem. Like, when y'all were preggo with us, I promise all of your meals were double the size of the legal limit, and it was fine. What happened to that energy? If I'm such a hassle, just hand me my umbilical cord and I'll go back in. I don't know what you want.